Hello and welcome to my presentation for Maryland Stubblefield students at University of the Incarnate Word. I'm pleased to be here with you, and I'll be speaking on nonprofit fundraising and evolving field. I am based in Central Texas and I work across Texas, and I have more than 30 years of experience. And I welcome your inquiries after my presentation by email, and I'll share my contact information and a wide variety of follow-up resources at the conclusion. First, I wanted to point out that University of the Incarnate Word is the ideal place for you to be. The mission statement is that UIW is committed to shaping good minds of strong character that will expand our world. At the core of UIW's mission is a commitment to social justice and community service. With a curriculum designed to broaden students' understanding of the needs of the world, men and women learn to become concerned and enlightened citizens, using their skills for a meaningful impact through the local and global community. Through programs offered at the undergraduate, graduate, and doctoral levels through 11 schools and colleges, students can positively influence countless industries and fields of study. Now, I broke that down to the key points. Again, I think you're in the right place. If you're interested in the nonprofit sector, in making a difference in our world, you're in the right place. UIW hopes to shape what I think is probably already your strong character, because you wouldn't be there and enrolled if you didn't have one. It is committed to social justice and community service, which is perfect. UIW intends to help you understand the needs of the world. It encourages you to become concerned and enlightened citizens. UIW invites you to use your skills for meaningful impact locally and globally. And the university wants you to influence countless industries and fields. Now, stepping back to share a bit about my background. I have 30 years plus of hands-on nonprofit fundraising experience in higher education and with nonprofit organizations focused on the arts, the environment, and social services, and from Texas, north to south, east to west. I've raised more than $33 million and a bit more for some of my volunteer projects. I hold 2 degrees from the University of Texas at Austin and was elected to the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi in graduate school. I was appointed by Governor Rick Perry to a Texas Commission on Environmental Quality project called Texas Environmental Education Partnership Fund Board that was focused on science-based K-12 environmental education for all Texans. And I served 2 consecutive 4-year terms, and my documentation of the work of the commission is now in the Texas State Library and Archives. 10 years ago, I launched Carolyn's nonprofit blog, and today more than 100 nations visit annually. I'm really proud of that. You'll see that I have quite a few follow-up articles that I suggest. I not only talk about my own experiences, but I share links to other outside sources that you might find helpful. I've also been the lead volunteer organizer of Nonprofit Tech Club Austin since 2015 and through the end of this year. And that is a partnership with Nonprofit Technology Network, TechSoup, and Entrepreneurial Hub Capital Factory in Austin. Based on our strong organization of that club and regular production, we are going to be evolving into the Texas chapter. So if you'd like to join up, programs are free, and we do have a Facebook group. You can learn more by getting on there. I also recently developed a nonprofit disaster preparation and recovery course with TechSoup Global, which was funded by the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. You can access free downloadable documents to help you plan from the TechSoup website. And there's also a course that you can take for a modest fee, and you can get a certificate of completion after you do that. And you know, Texas is prone to hurricanes and flooding and the like. So planning for a disaster, hopefully it will never happen. But if it does, you need to be prepared, because when they happen, people get rattled and they sometimes forget there are lots of things you can do to not only survive a disaster at your nonprofit, but also to actually thrive in terms of fundraising if you do it right. you lay the groundwork. So I was also elected a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. I have 3 proven ancestors. I have submitted 2 more supplementals, as they're called, and today I chair the Literacy Committee of the Austin Colony chapter. One of my ancestors was a famous spy who worked with General George Washington to ensure the success of the crossing of the Delaware. So I'm mighty proud of that. And, San Antonio is a place of deep history and a great love of history. And I have attended prior programs of the Alamo chapter of DAR, and it's a wonderful group. So that's a great place for historians like me. Today, I'm an independent nonprofit fundraising and communications specialist based in Central Texas, working statewide and occasionally beyond. I follow ethical fundraising practices, and I do not engage in percentage-based fundraising. Now, for the big picture. Nonprofits pack an economic punch. And people do not generally think of nonprofits as being such a strong and important part of our economy in the United States, but it truly is. Nonprofits employ 12.3 million people with payrolls exceeding those of most other U.S. industries. Nonprofits spend nearly $1 trillion on goods and services, from large to small ones, office, utilities, rent, and the like. Nonprofits have an even broader impact by creating economic activity and jobs that ripple through the community. In Texas, nonprofits employ 5.1% of total private employment. Total charitable giving grew 2019 to 2020. If you adjust that for inflation, that represents a growth of 3.8%. And during COVID last year, we're waiting to get those statistics, but it grew even further. So it does contribute to GDP. Number of nonprofits registered in the IRS back in 1998, 1.16 million. Today, though, that figure is closer to 2 million almost. So we're a growing sector, and as you'll see by the conclusion of my talk, I think we're really poised to grow even further. We'll see. Size of nonprofits by budget. I think the public has really no idea how many nonprofits there are, what size there are. And so I think it's good to keep in mind most of them are kind of the equivalent of small businesses. They're under 500,000 budget, and that's 66% as of 2016, and it's probably about the same today, I'm guessing. But basically, nonprofits are hubs for some of the most amazing innovation. They'll do a lot more with less. They'll figure out ways of doing amazing things with few resources. They'll harness the energy and talents of volunteers in unique and important ways, and that all end up serving their many worthy missions. So I really think it is a wonderful sector. Now, if we step back to the 18th century, how did people even care about those in need and social ills and all that stuff? And yes, they did. But how did they fund it? Taxes from local and colonial government supported the established churches in New England, which were congregational, and in the South, which were Anglican. A much faster rate of growth appeared in entirely voluntary religious denominations, especially the Methodists and Baptists, and among the Presbyterians, especially on the frontier. German and Dutch immigrants supported their Reformed churches in Pennsylvania and New York without tax money. So philanthropy got its start in the church, basically, in the United States, and certainly has grown and become much more sophisticated since then. Now, speeding ahead to the 21st century, we have something today called corporate social responsibility, CSR, and you'll hear that in the news, and it's really something you need to be focusing on if you're doing your research. This concept simply means corporations accept responsibility for helping to solve societal challenges. We saw in the early days, 18th, 19th, 20th century, a lot of huge innovations and accumulation of vast amounts of wealth, and there were a lot of criticisms of that. There still are today. But basically, in the 21st century, we've started to kind of come together, the nonprofit sector and the corporate and the money-making sector. And I think that's a good thing. This is a pyramid of corporate social responsibility from Thomas Insights. And I kind of like it because it does put it in context. I mean, first of all, at the base, you do need to meet your economic responsibilities. You need to be making a profit. You need to be paying salaries. You need to be expanding in new markets before you can actually really effectively make philanthropic investments of any depth. You need to meet your legal responsibilities and make sure you're adhering to the laws in every aspect of your work. Companies are scrutinized, and that is probably a good thing. You also need to meet your ethical responsibilities and make sure you're running in an ethical fashion and being appropriately diverse with your staff and with your board, and not advertising in false and misleading ways. And so once you've got all that done and the income's coming in, you can start addressing your philanthropic responsibilities, and companies choose different topics to focus on. But I think this is good to keep in mind, because we have to have all this base of this pyramid before we get to the top to have a really meaningful impact. Now, I simply wanted to point out, these are only a few of the ways people become wealthy and are able to make donations, but I think it's important to step into the shoes of philanthropists and to understand kind of where income comes from. Many have accumulated wealth by creating and by working with corporations, and that's been true since the founding of our nation. Some have invested wisely in corporations, and that has yielded profits. It's Wall Street. Some recent philanthropists you've read about have invented cryptocurrencies, and they've become very wealthy as a result of that, as more people adopt them. Some have actually just inherited wealth, and some of those distribute that wealth through foundations that award grants according to formal preset guidelines. Some own appreciated assets, and they may eventually sell those. And that can be works of art, real estate, crypto, whatever it is. But that may be an avenue through which they can then become philanthropists. So my conclusion here is that while we can criticize corporations and capitalism, and you don't want to see abuse and hoarding of vast amounts of wealth and that type of thing, but philanthropy is still to a large degree made possible by successful companies. And you'll see some philanthropists actually made all their money that has gone into their private foundation through a big company. So foundations and corporations are often tied together. They may be at various stages of that, but we can't, I think our society has shown that it's very strong and healthy, and we should be respectful of where the money comes from. That ends up in our nonprofit coffers. Now, this, I mentioned, corporate social responsibility got a big kick in, with the Occupy Wall Street protests. There was a perception of wealth inequality, which still exists today, political corruption, and too much corporate influence on government. And you will recognize one of the slogans from Occupy Wall Street: "We are the 99%." It's still popular today. So that showed Wall Street. There was a lot of anger, misperceptions, confusion, and frustration with the huge profits being made by some companies and individuals associated with Wall Street. So they needed to put more energy into solving some of our nation's social problems. And CSR has become incredibly important. And again, if you'll read Forbes and Fortune and Wall Street Journal, look for CSR articles, because that's about the nonprofit sector and how do we interface and solve big problems. And companies are, I think, uniquely poised to have a very positive effect on solving some of our issues nationally. Now, where does nonprofit funding come from? Generally, the big picture. First of all, of course, public support. This public support line right here that you see, that is the development officer's job, is to harness that public support. And there are a lot of ways to do that, as I'll explain in a minute. But that is the vast majority of nonprofit funding. Program revenue. You may teach classes like University of the Incarnate Word and receive tuition, or be a hospital and provide critical services. And I have seen even small nonprofits offer educational programs for a fee to independent school districts, however they can do it. So program revenue is a very large component. And government support. Luckily, especially after COVID, our government has stepped up to the plate, and we're getting some more grants for nonprofit work. And that can be sizable, of course. Investment, people who've invested, nonprofits that have invested wisely may receive, like universities often do, annual income from wise investments in endowed funds and other. So we'll talk about more of this later. Nonprofit fundraisers, here we go. This is my sector, by golly. I like this definition from Nonprofit Quarterly, which is a really reputable nonprofit publication you might like to follow on social media. Fundraising is generally defined as the process of soliciting financial support, and is an essential way for most nonprofits to bring in revenue for their organization's mission. Fundraising is about so much more than just asking for money. It also consists of ways for charitable organizations to build relationships, bring in foundation support, and attract new donors. But this is where I have seen some change over the years. And I think our profession is in a bit of a crisis, to be honest. Development officers are not well understood. We have gone from an average of 3.5 years on the job in the 1990s and 2000s, say, to only 6 months today. And I know some it's just 12 months. It's really terrible. There's constant turnover. Professional development officers should be focused on bringing donors through a meaningful life cycle, from a modest annual donation to a deeply meaningful planned gift through a will or estate plan gift, for instance. So development professionals are not just chasing money. They should be focused on developing long-term relationships. And you can't develop meaningful long-term relationships for a nonprofit in only 16 months. It just isn't possible. So somehow society and our sector needs to change that dynamic. That's kind of been pushed forward. My feeling is that fundraisers are essential workers. Again, they shouldn't be hired just to get the money and get it fast and get out of here, And unfortunately, I just see a lot of nonprofits that are startups and young ones that don't have the long view. So we need to encourage them to adopt a more long-term vision. I find nonprofit directors and founders sometimes view it fundraising as just, this is objective. We just use data. We find these people and we record it and we solicit them, and then they give the money and they get out of here. But I think there's an emotional connection, and long-term involvement is important. It's not inconsequential. And we have to change a mindset of our leadership in the sector. Again, I think that is to some degree younger and startup, smaller nonprofits. And we need to value the individuals on our staff, those development officers that are developing relationships, because those donors come back year after year. They increase their gifts if you treat them well and you follow through with stewardship. So my opinion also is that emotional connection is what sets nonprofits apart and ensures their long-term success. You care about the Red Cross, saving lives, helping people after a disaster. You care about animals and wildlife and habitat and a healthy world and recycling and whatever topic it is. That there is an emotional connection. You don't want to get carried away with it, but the fact is that sets us apart. It's hard to get emotional about a laptop, you know, but it's not hard to get, a little bit emotional about people starving. So I like that about the nonprofit sector. That's why I got into it. Now, methods to secure nonprofit revenue. As I indicated, private sector is the vast majority of where funding comes from. So there are individual and family donations, which you can solicit one at a time. If you think people can give a little bit more than just an annual $25 a year membership, you might want to focus on those. There are a lot of research tools today that can help you find people in your own database who can make more significant donations. But most gifts do come from individuals and families. There is grant research and writing. That's something I do a lot of, and that's a very traditional form of solicitation for support. There is an art and craft of grant research and writing, and you hear, I think people getting into the nonprofit sector at the start just think, oh, nonprofits just get grants. That's all they do. But really, as you can see by this list, they get funding through many, many different methods. There are also sponsorships. This is a great spot to mention corporations and corporate support, and that might involve a branding or an advertising match of some kind. These can be incredibly profitable. And as CSR, as I mentioned, becomes more important in society, sponsorships are more important. So you need to be watching the market, seeing what's going on there with companies, and see if you might find a match for a really great co-sponsored activity that brings in some revenue for you and visibility. That's one thing sponsorships can do, is really increase your nonprofit's visibility in the community. There are annual giving programs. You could do memberships where you join at a certain level and get benefits. There are annual giving days. Those have grown the past decade. Huge. They can be really huge. And that involves a lot of events preparation. And then everybody encourages their supporters to get online and give at one time, one day. And those have been tremendously successful. Monthly donor programs, which allow donors to make a little gift each month, automatic deduction, say, and then at the end of the year, that adds up to a pretty big sized gift. It really is a convenience and allows donors who care to make smaller gifts over time and have a really big impact and more. But there are annual giving programs, and those have their own logic and communication styles. There are a lot of email and newsletters and communications involved there. Now, special events, I have found that in other parts of the country, special events are not all that popular, but Texas, it's popular and they're successful. Some of them are wildly successful. So I've received a huge six-figure grant from a special event. And I wasn't the only one that year to get it, but they plan their fundraising throughout the whole year. They choose their children's charity and they vet them all and they make a decision. And luckily, one of my projects got a grant. So special events can be huge. They are time consuming. And I think that may be the objection on the part of some of our national nonprofit support organizations, but they can also be huge money makers. There is major gift fundraising. Now that takes some organization, because if you're going to ask somebody for a 6-figure or 7-figure gift, you're going to have your ducks in the row. You're going to have to make sure they're educated. They're going to probably involve professional advisors in that. You need to have some structure in order to do that, but you can raise millions of course, to do that. It does take a lot of time and attention. Crowdfunding has been wildly popular the past 10 years, and it will grow. I actually have a page on crowdfunding and cryptocurrencies on my website with a lot of articles that kind of indicate how popular these are. And basically, with major gift fundraising, I mentioned, you have sort of a pyramidal structure. You're looking for the big donor at the top, and then almost not quite as big donors, and it goes down that. So you're focusing on maybe a handful, in some cases, of donors capable of giving really large gifts to your new building, say, or your endowment fund. And sometimes that involves a naming opportunity. With crowdfunding, you're kind of looking at a more broad-based giving structure where a lot of people, you hope, will give to your crowdfunding project and help. It's a more democratic approach. I would only say, though, that some of the best crowdfunding campaigns have actually been organized like major gift campaigns, and they've gotten some initial investors that are really large and then gotten a bunch of little ones. So it's not all that different in terms of organization, but I will say this. I had a nonprofit tech club Austin program on crowdfunding, and we looked at Indiegogo and several other platforms. And I had people who had worked with all of those platforms, GoFundMe, and I had them speak on what they thought of those platforms. And the overwhelming thing was, they basically, the platforms are all really great, but they underestimated the amount of time that they had to put into responding to inquiries, thanking people. They were getting, in some cases with crowdfunding, they get like a little sticker, or they get a special gift depending on the size. And so managing that mailing out of those gifts and the like was just too much. They just really wanted the money, but that's not how it works. Planned giving, that's by putting a charity in your will and estate plan. That is certainly a great way to, more or less, without a whole lot of work, to receive income over time. A lot of times you won't know who the people are until they pass away, who have included you in a will or their estate plan. But it's a very worthwhile endeavor to make that option available and to encourage people to put your charity in their will and estate plan. There certainly are wise investments, endowments, income generated from wisely invested funds with various firms. And each year you get a payout, and that you keep that nest egg invested. And the more you put back into it, it grows, and the income then every year grows. So that's really a wonderful option. Some have great gift shops. If you look at some of our best museums, some produce and sell products. That can be from jars of honey to clothing lines, tote bags, jewelry. It can be many, many, many sources of or types of items that can be produced and sold. And some are just really good at that. So that's another way. And then, as I mentioned earlier, services nonprofits provide for fee. That's a huge option. Tuition, health services, whatever that is. So every one of these options takes time and has kind of a different logic behind it. So development officers need to be pretty smart, quick on their feet. Now, professionally speaking, there are a couple of pathways, I guess I would call them. You could have a lot of life experience and be an accidental development officer like I was. I mean, I just got thrown into it and I just picked up and went with it, and it was a good fit. But also you can have formal academic training like you're getting with Marilyn at UIW. I have a list of some professional development resources on my website, so I reference it there. But there are a lot of ways to get there. But what I would say personally is I do think the big picture and the theory and learning in a university setting or community college setting, however you're learning it, is great. It sets the stage. You can kind of avoid pitfalls by hearing what's going on over time. And but there's nothing like hands-on practice. I mean, there's just absolutely nothing like doing it, seeing it work, seeing it not work, changing your tactic. I think a combination of both is probably the ideal. I would recommend gaining hands-on experience by volunteering or securing an internship. And some nonprofits today are actually paying their interns. That's a new development and a good one, I think. And I also recommend finding a mentor, somebody who would take the time to teach you. And I know everybody's so busy, but wow, huge difference. I actually learned through a mentor while I was in graduate school. I actually was a volunteer for a nonprofit in Austin when I was in college, and I just decided I was going to learn. And she was outstanding, and to this day, there's probably no one who's come close to providing the information I needed to get forward in my career. She was really tough on me too. I learned. It was totally great. So if you can find a mentor, that is a wonderful thing. Credentialing. As you go along, you want to strengthen your knowledge. And so there are a lot of opportunities for continuing education today. There are credentials where you actually study and take a test and get a certificate. And here are a few of them. There are more, actually, but these are some of the better known ones. If you're technologically inclined, the N10 certificate program I recommend. I think it's really the most cutting edge. But each of the fields of nonprofits do have their own ethical concerns and methods of operating. They're just certain things that you need to learn about. You could become a specialist in planned giving. That might be smart going forward. I put the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy here because this has become one of the most prominent and smart educational programs up in Indiana, and they are online. So I recommend them highly. They are really on top of things, and I reference them a lot in my blog. So there are choices, depends on which field you're going to go in. I have been a CFRE in the past, and I have actually taught the CFRE review course in the past, but I'm currently asking CFRE to revise the course because there's some things that they say or they ask teachers to teach that I think need to be updated for the modern era. So we'll see what happens. But basically, you've got choices. The Grant Professionals Association is awesome. It's actually awesome if you're a grant writer or not a grant writer. So GPA is great, and that certificate is great. And there are chapters of GPA all over. And I would recommend, whether you're a grant writer or not, is to, on Tuesdays, grant chat, #grant chat. Follow that. I participated and shared information. It's really a lot of fun. That's on Twitter. Now, trend spotting. I wanted to round out my presentation here with some observations and to share some advice. So, past decade, technology and online communications have advanced greatly, and they've really changed our field. COVID-19 pushed nonprofits online even further. I mean, the trend is not going to stop. So, nonprofit fundraisers need to be skilled at communicating in person and in writing. Everywhere on there. And I have found, because you saw I have 2 degrees from UT Austin, and academic training is actually good. I mean, I was studying history and social sciences and that kind of thing. So I was writing and researching on a lot of topics. And actually, I got my first job officially based on my writing skills and my research skills, because that's a stumbling block for so many today. But anyway, you need to be skilled at communicating, and all that kind of goes back to writing. Stewardship of gifts. This is a issue, it's a trend, and it's a bad trend, I would say. But once gifts are given, our sector is very bad. I mean, it's just not acknowledging gifts properly. And it's not just like one time, okay, your name goes on all this on this publication. You know, you need to include them in social media if they approve. They are not anonymous. And you need to be thanking them and engaging them in your work and keeping them informed. And but the fact is, donor retention today is a big challenge, and that means nonprofit fundraisers constantly have to find new donors. So our sector needs to change that. Also, a big change the past 10 years has been professional advisors. That's attorneys, accountants, bankers. These people work with philanthropists, and they are it's kind of a second set of eyes, I would say. So the donor may have you in their heart, but professional advisors are more objective. What they want to make sure is that their donor is protected, that your nonprofit is run well, and that all the guidelines for the donation are followed. So today you're not just talking to the donor. A large amount of the time you're also talking to professional advisors, and we all have to engage and educate professional advisors, because I think they need a little bit more knowledge about how nonprofits work. Not all of them quite understand that, and that can lead to some poor evaluations of really worthy nonprofits. Also, large-scale consulting firms traditionally have dominated the industry, especially when it comes to capital campaigns, endowment campaigns, major gift campaigns. And I think, because this is a good thing about data, there are a lot of new data collection and review methods, and those have gone on and on. In fact, a lot of that came from the financial industry, needing to review candidates for loans and the like. So that information has now been applied to nonprofits. And if you can get on one of those platforms, sometimes there's a modest fee, or your constituent management donor data system may link to it. You may have that as part of your package. Then you're going to be much better off, and you can do a lot yourself. I am a little bit of a contrarian, and I don't think you need to be hiring these big, expensive firms. There's a lot of ways that you can get the job done internally. So I think that's a trend. I think there's just some wonderful ways to make securing major gifts more possible, and consulting firms who then really don't even know you, but they get in there, they have their formula, and they do it, and there you go. And you are charged hundreds of thousands sometimes. It's just, I don't think it's necessarily always worth it. So, trends. Also, nonprofits need to establish credibility online, and that is not only for the sake of the donor, but also professional advisors who are going to be reviewing you and not even talking to you, maybe. They're going to get online, and they're going to want to look at your tax return. GuideStar has been online for decades, and basically every year it pulls out of the IRS into its database all nonprofit tax returns. So you can get on there and find any nonprofit and their tax returns. And professional advisors are definitely going to be checking that out. Make sure you're filing a tax return and that you're operating in a responsible manner. So there's a lot of numbers there. It's not a lot of explaining. But GuideStar has, over the past 10 years, developed a profile system. And for free, any nonprofit can claim its profile and complete and provide supportive information to flesh out the the profile. And then when someone gets online and looks at your tax return, they can see, they earned the gold seal for transparency. They've really taken the time to complete their GuideStar profile. This is great. And it helps donors and professional advisors really assess your nonprofit, how you operate, how ethical you are, how committed to diversity, gender equity, you're on your board. I mean, all of that is something that you can explain on your free profile. And so I always recommend that. And if I work with nonprofits and they don't have one, I generally make them get their GuideStar profile going. You can also activate a donate button, by the way, on GuideStar right there. So I also think for credibility, every nonprofit should invest in professional accounting services, even if you don't have a whole lot of accounting activity going on. Having an objective authority with an accounting background specifically outside of your organization is a good sign that you're being open and honest. And so I would always recommend that. Today, word of mouth endorsement is as important to sales of products as it is to fundraising. So testimonials on your website, on platforms like Great Nonprofits, which make sharing testimonials really easy. All those things make a huge difference. People want to know, did their friend have a good experience? Do they really like their nonprofit? It's just human nature. So testimonials, I think that will continue to be influential in donor decision making. I also think today, given the high sensitivity we have about equity and diversity and ethical fundraising and non-discrimination, that we should all in the nonprofit sector make available on the website a page that discusses those issues and our nonprofit's commitment to them. And don't make it hard to find. It's not like it has to be on the front page, but have it there, have it available. People are nervous, they're upset, and so we've been through some rocky times the past few years, and this is an easy, honest, straightforward way to just do it up front. And there are templates online. If you need help, National Council on Nonprofits is a great resource for some of this. I also noticed, and I like this, federal agencies are asking nonprofits to have a disaster plan in place. I was working on a federal grant. Boom, there was a little box. Do you have a disaster plan in place? It was like, ooh. So TechSoup is a great resource to help you. There are others in Texas General Land Office, I think, and Department of Emergency Management. They have resources, but you need to have a plan in place and review it every couple of years. And I know it seems like, at the time, on and on, just doing the daily work of your nonprofit, you think, oh, nothing's going to happen. But what happens if your computers are stolen? What if you haven't backed up that information to the cloud? What if you do have a flood or a tornado? What if your hard copy records are now stored in a warehouse and a sludge, landslide goes through it? Like I had one nonprofit who had to reconstruct a list of donors over months. It took months because all the prior records were completely destroyed from sludge. It's gross. So disasters take many forms. That's what I guess I want to say. From human to nature-made. And this is a trend, and absolutely nonprofits need to initiate electronic transfer options for donors and rely less on the mail. We need to be able to go from the donor's bank account to your bank account and no handing checks over. This has especially been true in areas hard hit by hurricanes, where even the post office is knocked out of business and they can't get a check in the mail and deposit it because the Postal Service can't operate in their community. So if you had it set up electronically through a donor online giving form, you get it. You don't have to be there in person to accept the mail. So, and I have received some very large grants from foundations, electronic transfer straight to the nonprofit's bank. So that's been, almost 10 years ago. So the trend has increased. And with COVID, it's really increased even more. Nonprofit fundraisers do need to invest more time in reading the business press and understanding the market, what's going on in our world today. Whoa, up and down. Most of the business press I found do discuss, the latest natural disaster, how that's impacting various industries and areas. So you're going to get the news and you're going to get the market news as well. Everybody thought, oh, with the last economic downturn back in 2011, in that era, 10 years ago, people thought, oh, well, all the companies we used to go to for support and foundations won't have any money. Well, some of them, what happened with Whataburger? Whataburger became hugely important. Dollar General, some of the lower cost, the Walmart went way up. So you need to understand where money is, and then approach them for your nonprofit if it's a good fit, of course. But you'll understand that if you read the press. And also, I want you to follow CSR developments. That's really exciting as that accelerates in our world today. Planned giving must become more of a focus, and I'll show some statistics about that shortly. Basically, America is graying. Pew Research has great studies on this, especially with the census results that were recently published. So definitely more planned giving needs to be a focus. And rainy day funds. We saw that with COVID for sure. We saw it in the last, economic downturn. If you have socked away funds, if you don't trust the stock market, just put it in a bank account and just hide it up there. Keep it safe so you can access it. If you need to pay staff, if you need to buy some equipment, maybe launch a capital campaign, whatever it is, just pay, payroll. But if you will just patiently, as when times are good, sock away some money in an account, I think investment makes sense. And there's some great investors today. So, that's what I would do. But we need more rainy day funds, and not to just every year it comes and goes in, the money goes in, the money goes out. Try and build a reserve. Get ready. America, look what's going to happen. It's estimated that nearly 45 million U.S. households will transfer 68 trillion over the next 25 years. With tax laws in flux, estate planning is more critical than ever. To lessen the tax bite, families may consider Roth IRA conversions, life insurance, gifting to nonprofits, and other strategies. So get in there, make planned giving and a focus, I say, to our nonprofits today, and make it easy. But there needs to be some energy put into it. Again, it's hard with planned giving because a lot of people will put your nonprofit in their will and not tell you. But regardless, make sure that you are covering your bases with a little information to constituents about planned giving. Also, I close out my presentation with this good news. In fact, this week, got an Instagram post from UBS, which is like Fidelity and banks and others, investment firm that manages funds for philanthropists. UBS is a great firm. And here is a survey they just published, Investors' Purpose Now, putting capital behind experiences, relationships, and helping others. This is great news. 79% say that COVID made them reassess what's important. 68%, I want to make more of a difference. 93%, I am more appreciative of what I have. 77%, I believe life experiences are more important than material things. And 90%, I want to align my investments with my values. This is great news. We're coming together, corporate world, investing world, and social good. And certainly all aspects of this process and this interaction need to be ethical and legal. But I think we're on a really good pathway, and I see a very positive future for the nonprofit sector going forward. Now, here is my blog again and my email. If you have follow-up questions, don't hesitate to email me anytime. I've known Marilyn for several years, and you can also ask her. and she can reach out to me. We are currently talking on Facebook Messenger, so we're talking a lot. Also, I mentioned I was going to point out some articles in my blog. I do share my thoughts, of course, but I link to a lot of outside sources, Forbes, Fortune, whatever it is. And given the focus of what I've talked about today, here are some articles I think that you might enjoy reading on these topics: corporate support, capitalism, professional advisors, huge, rainy day funds, reading about what's going on in the stock market and the financial realm, and more. Thank you so much.